Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Motown Exile. My name is Ryan Relkin. I'm your host. Brendan Relkin will be with us again next week. He's a little bit under the weather, so we're going to let him heal up and get over that cough and cold that so many of us are going through right now. And in the meantime, you're going to have to put up with me for today's episode. So this week, we're going to talk a lot about Brad Holmes and his end of the season press conference. We have a few of the games already in the books for the playoffs, and I got to admit, it's been kind of sucky watching some of these other teams play when the Detroit Lions, if they had done what they needed to do and taken care of their business, they should be right there with them. But they're not. They didn't earn it. And that is why the tone of the press conference with Brad Holmes was one that we were all anticipating seeing what it was going to be. So for the basis of this conversation, I'm going to take some points from an article by Nolan Bianchi from the Detroit News. I thought he did a really nice job in his article of summarizing some key points in Brad Holmes' press conference. The first one being that they did the best they could. And what he meant by that when he wrote they did the best they could was that often in the press conference, Brad would go and would say things like, you don't know the moves we tried to make behind the scenes that I can't talk about, or we could have done that, but I can't really talk about that right now. Especially when they got into the part about aggressiveness, when Bob Winowski, also of the Detroit News and 97.1 The Ticket, asked Brad if he thought he was not aggressive enough. And Brad asked Bob, he said, define aggressiveness. And I wish Bob had asked a question in return or made a statement and said, how about Philadelphia trading a third round draft pick for Jalen Phillips? I think that would have been a good retort question, and it would have hopefully forced Brad to start talking a little bit about some of the moves that he made that may have in the previous draft that may have prevented the Lions from being able to make any of those big trades that we were hoping that they could do. For example, Philadelphia traded a third round pick, and the Lions don't have a third round pick in 2026, at least not as of now. And that's because they traded two third round picks, which they would have had, to draft Isaac Tesla. Now, Isaac Tesla looks like he's an emerging player, and it looks like we drafted a really good player. That said, Aiden Hutchinson still doesn't have a partner, and that really became something big in the course of the season. Al-Qadim Muhammad ended up, I think, with 11 and a half sacks, but he only had sacks in 7 games. He played in every single game. That tells me there are more than half the games the Lions were not getting the kind of pressure that they needed, and Aiden wasn't getting the help that he needed. So I'm looking for more action from Brad, and let's see if he can back that up.
I understand if you don't see a certain amount of, let's call it transactional activity, and that's all you don't see. You don't see the result. You don't see another player added. You don't see the trade. You don't see the big splash signing. But our work ethic has always been high, and a lot of times, really all the time, is you have to put so much work into making sure that you don't make a mistake. Really, the easier thing to do is to see a name of interest that you've heard of, you think's been a good football player, and then you just make the call, make the move. And then you just didn't really put in all the time and efforts to find out, well, why this player is even available, or why is this player not being signed back? So it's a lot of work that goes through. So that's not going to change. But I don't want to sit here and say that just more activity is going to be the answer. Honestly, a lot of the things that we'll look at and a lot of the changes and tweaks and adjustments that we will make probably won't come with a headline. But that's not to say that we won't do something that's in that splash category but I don't think it's it's not indicative of a lack of effort, work ethic. Look, I think one of y'all called me at the trade deadline and asked me, did you talk to anybody? And I just kind of, I wasn't offended, but I think my response was, well, why are you asking me now? Because it's a NFL calendar item with a title on it. You didn't ask me about if I talked to anybody early November or October or September or August or in June or in May. Like, the roster building thing and engaging in talks with teams, that's year round. But I totally understand that that's not public information, and you can only just go off of what's out there. But there's a lot of work, so the work ethic's not going to change. But we'll still be looking at everything.
Another point of concern, or a topic of concern in the press conference, was just accountability. And in the press conference, Brad was asked to grade himself, and like his colleague Dan Campbell, head coach of the Lions, he graded himself an F. He said, because we did not achieve our goals this season, and I appreciate him being humble in that regard. And over the course of the press conference, to be quite honest, Brad was a lot different than in some other press conference. Overall, he did seem a little bit more humble. He did have a little bit more humility, and that was nice to see, because this isn't a year where you're going to come out and you want to start problems with the press and be defensive about questions. He didn't really have a defensive tone, while at the same time he did dodge a lot of questions. And I think that the reporters missed some opportunities for some follow-up. One of the areas where Brad was pretty honest and straightforward is when he was talking about David Montgomery. He did talk about the fact that Montgomery, was underutilized this season. And I think that had a lot to do, less to do with David Montgomery and more to do with Jahmyr Gibbs and his development and what he's done over the past season, and how he's emerged as one of the best 2 or 3 running backs in the NFL. That said, I think that David Montgomery still has a lot to give to the team, but the salary cap situation that the Lions have, they are going to be in need of shedding some salary going into the offseason in order to maybe make some moves. There's going to be some restructuring of contracts. Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown are 2 likely candidates there. There's going to be some players that they're not going to re-sign and bring back. And then, of course, there's trading away potentially players like David Montgomery. In addition, there's the fact that there might be some retirements. Eric Decker and some others, Graham Glasgow may retire as well. Sorry, Taylor Decker and Graham Glasgow might both retire as well. So that's something that we might see free up some space and allow the Lions to make a few moves. I think that one of the things that bothered a lot of people as well was, his answers to some questions. He was asked about Giovanni Manu and using picks on him, and now he's going in his developmental pick. Now he's going into his 3rd season, and I think that one thing I heard TJ Lang in some comments about the Brad Holmes press conference talk about that I thought was pretty important was that he talked about how much of an influence Bill Parcells is on Dan Campbell, and that Bill Parcells had a philosophy on developmental players that you groom them for 2 seasons, and then they have the 3rd season's training camp to show that they can make the team. And right now, we're not expecting Giovanni Manu to be a starter. We're not expecting him to be a Pro Bowl player. But if he could be a serviceable backup, someone who could come in and take snaps, someone who in a pinch or in an emergency could become a player that can be relied on, and where we don't have to worry about Jared Goff getting smeared like he did against the Cincinnati Bengals and Trey Hendrickson when Manu played in that game, then I think that'll be a good thing. I think that's fair. I think that's fair to wait through training camp, and then we'd expect the Lions to make the necessary moves that they're going to have to make. Some other things that he talked a little bit about with the edge rusher position and with just the draft overall. He didn't really tip his hand at all about what he was going to do, what his strategy was going to be in the draft. Other than to say that he's going to pretty much stick with the strategy that he's taken, trying to find the best players available, really relying on the Lions scouts and on the things that he has at his disposal for information to try and maybe fill in the blanks with some of the best players available. The Lions have a lot of holes. I mean, let's be honest. So we didn't see safety at the start of last season becoming a hole, but with the injury, the Achilles injury to Ryan Branch, and then I guess the mystery injury to Kirby Joseph, which we're not getting a lot of specifics on, but what I've heard has not seemed all that encouraging. We don't know where we're at in terms of safety, and that might be a position second, third round that the Lions are going to need to look for. So, kind of expecting maybe some trades. I've done a couple of draft simulators, and I'll maybe start posting those in the comments so you guys can see the players that I've drafted, the ones that are available. It looks like the draft is deep in offensive tackles, which is a good thing because the Lions are probably most likely going to use their first pick if they keep it to draft an offensive tackle, if not to immediately replace, to very soon replace Taylor Decker. And it also looks like it's deep at safety. Looks like there's some players available. That edge rush position is going to be big. If the Lions don't add someone through free agency, I think that we're going to be expecting them to draft someone who can come in and make a difference. And it looks like the Lions, another thing Brad talked about when he discussed moves that we could expect in the offseason, it kind of sounded pretty likely that he was going to go out and look for a new center for the Detroit Lions. So that center from the Baltimore Ravens, Linderbaum, he could be in play with the Lions. He's young. I think he's only like 25 years old. He would be a great fit, somebody that the team can continue to build around and get back to their strength, which a few years ago was the offensive line. They're just punishing people. And I think that's the biggest thing. So my takeaway is that there's not a lot that Brad can say publicly. And we don't want Brad to say too much, because if he does say too much publicly, he could tip his hand. He could cost himself some leverage if he's looking at making a potential move. And we don't want to see him do that. We want to see the Lions get the best return on investments on whatever moves that they're able to make, that he's able to make this team better. I think in the big picture, the Lions had a winning season 3 years in a row. Now, that might sound like a cop-out. This season was a huge disappointment for me. But I think, though, over the course of my lifetime, I have not seen many years where they've had a winning season 3 years in a row. I fully expect them to rebound with the last place schedule coming up. I think that they're going to shore things up. And I think Brad and Dan have both earned the right for us to trust them a little bit going into this offseason. Now, final take on the press conference. Brad's words only mean so much. I'm going to look for his actions. What kind of moves does he make? What does he do with the salary cap? How is he able to better the team through the draft, which he has shown he can do, but in the last few drafts, he hasn't quite gotten that return on investment. What's he do with the defensive backfield? Is he going to go after safeties or cornerbacks in free agency? There's a lot of mysteries, a lot of question marks heading into the offseason, but we're going to have to just all wait and see, be patient, and see how things unfold. So that's pretty much it for today's edition of Motown Exile. Again, I'm Ryan Relkin. I want to ask you to please click the like button if you enjoyed this content for today. And also, we'd love for you to subscribe. We have a goal of about 1,000. We're looking for 1,000 subscribers. If we can get 1,000 subscribers, that would be outstanding. More content will be coming soon as we get things rolling with this new adventure that we've started with the Motown Exile podcast. I want to thank you for tuning in today, and have a great rest of your day and an awesome week.